Hi, my name is Brian Miller, the editor here at PhinPhanatic.com, and this is our first video blog. This week, the Miami Dolphins will be taking on the Tennessee Titans in Nashville. Both teams entered the game 1-3, although it can be said with a lot of certainty that the Tennessee Titans have played a lot more physical this year than what the Dolphins have. Miami comes into this game on a 3-game losing skid, so do the Tennessee Titans, but the difference is that last week, the Tennessee Titans actually came very close to winning their game against the Buffalo Bills, losing by only 1 point. The Dolphins haven't come close to beating anybody this year, except for the Washington Redskins in Week 1. Now, I know the Jacksonville Jaguars game was only a 3-point difference, but the Dolphins did not play very well in that game. They came up a little bit short, obviously, like I said, 3 points, but it's how they got there that was the biggest problem. They were able to claw back a little bit, and we saw a little bit of a claw back against the New York Jets before it fell short as well in London. This week, obviously, there's been a lot of changes. Joe Philbin's gone. Dan Campbell's a new interim head coach. We're just going to call him the head coach for now because he's got 12 games ahead of him. This is one of those rare situations where a coach is dismissed early in the season. Last year, it was Dennis Allen of the Oakland Raiders, when they came back from London after getting pummeled by the Dolphins. So there seems to be something about those early London games that are costing coaches their jobs. The question about Dan Campbell is whether he can take this team to another level. Now, he's promised a lot more physicality with this team. He's also talked about bringing a new culture to this team and saying that the way things have been done lately, they can't continue. And I think all of the fans can agree that is absolutely the case. Heading into this week, there's going to be a couple of keys. The obvious key is going to be on the defensive line. If the Miami Dolphins can't put pressure on Marcus Mariota and collapse that pocket, plus keep containment on him, he is able to run, they're going to have a tough time stopping this team. They're not a great offensive team. They don't have to be. They're methodical and they're consistent, something that the Dolphins are not on defense. And Ndamukong Suh's got to step up. He was complaining about the Kevin Coyle defense. Well, Kevin Coyle's not there anymore, and Lou Anarumo is. The question is, can this team elevate themselves and play at the talent level that they are on paper? It's something that they haven't been able to do this year. Offensively, the Dolphins have a major offensive line problem. Shuffling in and out of players just isn't going to cut it. They have to find some continuity, and they have to find, more importantly, some chemistry. Whether or not the Dolphins can do that under Dan Campbell, that's a different story. He's preaching all of the right stuff. He's asking the players to follow his lead. He's talking the talk and asking the players to walk his walk. The players seem to be responding to that, in practices at least, because over the course of the last week and a half, the Dolphins have held a couple of practices, and they've been pretty physical. Dan Campbell reintroduced the Oklahoma drill, something that most teams don't practice outside of training camp, but yet the Dolphins are trying to shake things up a little bit. Ken O'Keefe will be elevated from his position, and he will be taking over work with the quarterback, specifically, obviously, Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill's been kind of sheltered in there without a true quarterback's coach. Al Saunders is going to take over working with the wide receivers and the tight ends as a senior consultant. He's got a lot of energy, and all the players seem to really like what he's dishing. He's one of the best in the business, but can he turn this team around? The problem with the Dolphins hasn't been their tight ends and their wide receivers. The problem really is their offensive line. Jawan James has had an up and down season. He's had some good games. He's had some bad games. Mike Pouncey needs to be more physical, something that Dan Campbell pointed out in his opening press conference. And Brandon Albert's supposed to be back this week. He's kind of been dealing with a hamstring injury, but even when he was in the game in the first week, he was a little bit sluggish. The question, obviously, is, can he bring the physicality and the energy that we know that this guy can bring? He is a big-time player. He is a left tackle that can protect the blind side of Ryan Tannehill, and let's face it, Jason Fox hasn't been doing a very good job of that. The real question, however, is can the Dolphins elevate the play of their guards? Rookie Jamil Douglas, who's taken in the 4th round, has been okay, but he's not ready for a starting position. The problem with the Dolphins is they don't have anybody else that they can put in there. He's kind of stuck. He is the best of what the Dolphins have to offer right now, and frankly, he's just not good enough. On the other side of Mike Pouncey, you've got Dallas Thomas, maybe Billy Turner. Neither one of these players are really being productive. Dallas Thomas had a great preseason. A lot of people started thinking maybe he'd turn the corner, but once we got into the games, it all went south. And the Dolphins need to get this production back up north. If they can't protect Ryan Tannehill, and they can't keep him from taking hits, the offense isn't going to go anywhere. Receivers can't run their routes. The tight ends can't run their routes. You're going to hold back a tight end in order to keep Ryan Tannehill safe, and you're taking away a lot of production on offense. Dan Campbell's promised a big change offensively. He wants them to be more aggressive. To me, that means that we should see, I'm hoping to see, bigger third down attempts at converting on third and long. The Dolphins this year, when faced with third and long, tend to run the ball. It's not going to work. When you're faced with a 3rd and 10 or a 3rd and 12 and you're not throwing that ball 12 yards down the field, you're basically saying, here, we're going to punt. We're going to try and pick up a couple of yards so that we can punt the ball back to you. You may as well do it on 3rd down if that's the case and surprise them. There won't be anybody else back there. Matt Darn's had a pretty good year so far, but he shouldn't be on the field as much as he is. The Dolphins need to be more balanced and more consistent on the offensive side of the ball, both with their running game and with their passing game. Ryan Tannehill is a very accurate quarterback, and it's going to be interesting to see what he can do now that those shackles have been taken off of him and hopefully Bill Lazor. Ryan Tannehill still can't hit the deep ball, so don't expect it, but do expect to see more 20-yard passes. He's good with those passes. Let him roll out of the pocket. The more he rolls out of the pocket, the better he is. He's more accurate, and he can throw the deep ball a lot better too. There's no reason to keep this quarterback standing in a pocket if they can't protect him. Get him to the outside, give him some space where he can make the choice as to whether or not he needs to throw the ball or run the ball. Something else that we haven't seen a lot of him this year. Again, I like to attribute this to Joe Philbin, and I'm not being negative in that. Joe Philbin was a very safe coach. He preached safety, and the players emulated that. They wanted mistake-free football, but when you make it so restrictive that the players go out there and play not to make mistakes, they're also playing not to make big plays. And that's something that the Dolphins have to work on. Will we see that against Tennessee? I think we'll see some of it. Will it be successful is a different story. Defensively, Kevin Coyle is gone. Lou Anarumo is taking over as the defensive coordinator. And we will see a slimmed-down version of Kevin Coyle's defense. You're not going to change the defensive scheme midway through the season. You're not going to change it 4 weeks into the season. But you can simplify it. You can allow the players to play better up front. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that say read and react defenses are not the problem. But in this case, it actually is. The problem here is when you've got great talent up front and you're asking them not to make their first move forward, but instead to take on the block, stand up, figure out which way the play is going to go, and then hit the holes or hit which side of the gap that these runners are going to go through. You're setting up confusion for linebackers that aren't very good. Those linebackers have to be able to plug that other hole. It's all a matter of seconds. And the Dolphins aren't very good at that right now. And a lot of it has to do with the linebacker core having some issues. Now, a lot of people have been down on Sue this year, but in reality, Sue's not playing very bad. He's playing his kind of game. He takes on 2, sometimes even 3 blockers. Teams are accounting for him. Somebody else needs to step up. Cameron Wake hasn't been active for most of the season so far, based on the fact that he's been dealing with a hamstring injury of his own. He hasn't been at practice this week. Will he play in the game? We don't know. But it doesn't matter. The Dolphins are supposed to be very deep at defensive end. Derek Shelby, Terrence Fede, these guys need to step up. And Olivier Vernon, starting on the other side of where Wake is not doing a very good job on that right side. And he needs to get more physical as well. As we roll back to the linebackers, Jelani Jenkins is really the only player that's been stepping up. This week against the Tennessee Titans, the linebackers have to do a very good job at covering the tight ends. And they have to be able to cover the running backs out of the backfield as well in passing situations, something that they've been struggling to do. Not to mention the fact that they have to be aware of the fact that Marcus Mariota can run the ball. And if the Dolphins can put significant pressure on him, chances are something up underneath is going to open up for him to take off. And if the linebackers aren't staying at home, if they're not doing their jobs, Marcus Mariota is going to be able to pick up easy first downs. We've seen that a lot this year. We saw this a lot last year and the years before that. It has to change, and it has to change now. At cornerback, we don't know if Brent Grimes is going to play. He has been injured. He's been dealing with a strained ACL injury, or it's an MCL, one of the two. He's dealing with a strained knee injury. He has not been in practice this week. That means that what we're probably going to see is Jamar Taylor playing in his place, and either Zach Bowman or Bryce McCain playing on the other side. Ideally, you want to put Zach Bowman out there, put Jamar Taylor out there, and let Bryce McCain play the interior where he's much better at. They've been playing him on the edge, and he simply hasn't been able to acclimate himself to that outside. He needs to play that slot corner role, that nickel role, and if he can take that on and do a good job, the Dolphins have a good chance at being able to stop some of these receivers aren't great, but given time, any receiver can get open. And that's been an issue for the Dolphins, is because when they do play teams that don't have great receivers, they're allowing these players to get open and make plays and find space because the Dolphins can't stop them. They can't get pressure on the quarterback. That needs to change. Safety position, Rashad Jones is having another great year, but the play of Walt Aikens and Michael Thomas needs to step up. If they can do that, if they can play physical, if they can buy into what Dan Campbell is trying to sell to this team may look a lot different on Sunday. I expect them to look a lot different on Sunday. Last year, when Joe Philbin lost his father, the Dolphins stepped up both offensively and defensively and won 37-0 over the visiting San Diego Chargers. That's not to say that Joe Philbin was the problem then, but teams play better. If you go back a few years ago when Todd Bowles took over for the fired Tony Sperano, the team elevated their play. They wanted to play for this guy. They want to play for Dan Campbell. Will it produce a victory this week? We'll find out very, very soon. But more importantly, it's not what we see this week out of this team. It's what we see the following week against Houston and the quality of play that we see starting to brew in Miami. After Houston, the Dolphins play the New England Patriots. If they can start playing more physical, if they can start getting more chemistry, the Dolphins they won't have a chance necessarily to beat the Patriots, but they may be able to take a lot more physical gameplay to them, and maybe the game stays close enough for them to possibly win that game. But it all starts this week against the Tennessee Titans, and if the Dolphins can do that, we'll see what happens. Until next time, I'm Brian Miller. This is PhinPhanatic.com. Thanks for watching.